Welcome to the Gentleman's Guide to Gaming. Now, between you and me, this is the second time I have recorded this review. The first time I was wearing a t-shirt, and while the review contained everything that I intended for it to, I reflected upon it and I thought to myself, you know what, this book requires a bit more respect than that. This book requires me to wear a suit, shirt and tie in order to review it, and so here I am, donned in my finest, in order to review Vampire the Masquerade 20th Anniversary Edition, in all of its leather-bound goodness. Now, this was the order you could acquire through limited release, with the indented Ankh cover, the indented, well, embossed rather, spine, with, of course, the lovely little double X there for either 20th anniversary if you choose, or as an inside joke to White Wolf readers who got fed up with all the books that said please refer to page XX. Now, Vampire the Masquerade 20th Anniversary Edition, it is a very important book. It's a very important book in my collection, and it's a very important book in the field of roleplay. Why is that? Well, Vampire the Masquerade was a very important game when it reached its peak. It certainly dominated Dungeons & Dragons for a fair old time in the early 90s, with its mood, with its counterculture, with the way it resonated with role players at the time. It brought in a whole wave of role players that would not have been interested in fantasy-style RPG. This was evocative, angsty, moody gaming, and Vampire the Masquerade, in case you are one of those rare few who are unfamiliar with the setting, basically puts you in the role quite often as a newly embraced, that is created, vampire who is forced to deal with essentially cutting off the attachments to his or her mortal life, or suffering their gradual loss, whilst ingratiating oneself into kindred, that is vampire, existence, and all of the Machiavellian schemes that go with it. Now, that may sound like a bit of a dry setting, but if you think of the various things that vampires have to go through, not only can they no longer eat or drink, which makes dining out with friends and maintaining their veneer of humanity, this masquerade, quite difficult, it also means, of course, associating with your loved ones, associating with your colleagues. Going out in the day becomes difficult, nigh impossible. It means you can only come out at night. It means you can only feed on blood. It means that you are forced to spend time with others like you. Like any other social pariah, you are forced into groups with those who suffer the same affliction as yourself. Now, these groups aren't necessarily all vampires of the same blood. You have different clans, different bloodlines. You have the Ventru, who are self-styled regal types, those who would rule vampiric existence. You have the Tremere, fearsome blood magicians, very cliquish, very cult-like. You have the Gangrel, who embrace their inner beast, who show signs of that monster within them. And then, of course, you have the Nosferatu, arguably the most afflicted of all vampire clans, for their beast shows quite plainly on the outside by the fact that when they are embraced into the clan, they become a monster to look at. And it is at that point that I will start showing you some of the artwork from Vampire the Masquerade 20th Anniversary Edition. There's not much point in my going on about the setting in too much length, because the likelihood is you probably wouldn't buy the 20th Anniversary Edition if you weren't already familiar with the setting. Now, that's not to say that the book wouldn't be useful to a new gamer. It certainly would. There are many very good things to recommend Vampire the Masquerade 20th Anniversary Edition, but just to exhibit, for one thing, there's a Nosferatu. He's a bit of an ugly critter, I will admit. One thing you may notice if you are an established vampire fan is that, by jingo, this art is in colour. It was always the case that in Vampire the Masquerade the art was gloomy, black and white, moody. in this book, in the 20th anniversary edition, you do get some of those black and white pieces. You get some of the classics that are well recognisable as things from original edition Vampire, or Revised, or many of the clan books. But what's more, you get these lovely full colour splats, these portraits that take up an entire page spread, and of course the clan art is all in colour as well, and you get lovely pieces of colour art dotted throughout, and almost all of it is incredibly high quality. Now, what's more, if you're a vampire fan, you may recognise the name Tim Bradstreet. In fact, if you're a fan of comic book art in general, you may know of Tim Bradstreet. And Tim Bradstreet did a lot of the art for the original Vampire the Masquerade, and he returns for 20th anniversary edition to do these colour pieces, and it is excellent to see. It really brings the feeling back, the feeling you got when you first looked through Vampire the Masquerade, except now it's bright colours that are also gothic, also moody, also horrific. There are pieces of art in this that I'm not going to make this video just an art show, by no means. You know, you have to buy the book to see all of the fantastic art in this. But I especially like the Malkavian, who, while exhibiting something of a Harley Quinn kind of appearance, is so Malkavian. You can tell she is a Malkavian just by looking at her, if you're familiar with the setting. And art like that is peppered throughout the book. What does the book contain? Well, simply put, it contains the core rules for Vampire the Masquerade, except it also contains snippets from clan books, snippets from the Guide to the Camarilla, Guide to the Sabbat. It contains snippets from Elysium, it contains snippets from Ghoul's Fatal Addiction. Essentially, this book, this one tome, contains everything you will ever need to run Vampire the Masquerade. Now, that's no small boast. Vampire the Masquerade was always historically a game where the most addicted players, those who enjoyed the setting the most, and GMs, storytellers in this case, would have to buy truckloads of books in order to get their heads fully round the setting. Vampire was always drenched in metaplot, the background storyline that was constantly going on, constantly evolving, and if you didn't keep up with the books, you lost track of the metaplot, and it resulted in some storytellers becoming rabidly fascistic about the game, about the setting, and some of the players losing touch and thinking, well, you know, this is getting a bit too heavy for me. If you want a clean break on Vampire, a fresh start on Vampire, then this is the book for you, because not only does it contain all of the setting that you could require, it also sort of retcons it. Some of the changes that happen in Revised, for instance, the Assamite blood curse being lifted, the Ravenos being nearly wiped out, the Gangrel leaving the Camarilla, all of that is nullified. It is as if it has returned to the original setting, the setting that most people loved. And while the storyline is definitely there in the background, you still have the various Machiavellian doings between Camarilla and Sabbat cities, and this book details what cities are primarily Sabbat, what cities are primarily Camarilla, which is a very useful tool for the GM and players in case they want to choose where they come from or something like that. It's, well, I don't know, I suppose I'm a bit lost for words. This book does contain everything you will need. It doesn't go too heavily into the setting, it retcons it, it just makes it pure, untainted, and the perfect place for you to just start a chronicle and sprawl out, which is what I'm doing now at my club, as you may have noticed with some of the Vampire the Masquerade Chronicle videos that I have put up lately. What does this book have that a normal core rulebook for Vampire the Masquerade would not? Well, that's the difficult thing, because while it does have those snippets from other books, it contains the best parts from many, many books, it is ultimately just a core rulebook. It changes some of the rules. For instance, multiple actions now, and this is my favourite rule change, but this is one rule change really, is that in the past, if you took multiple actions in the game, you have a dice pool of d10s, and you would deduct one die from each additional action you were going to take in that round. So if you wanted to fire a gun at 3 different targets, you'd use the same dice pool 3 times, except each time you deduct one die from each pool, thus making your chances of success lessened on each occasion. Now, if you want to make 2 actions, for instance driving a car and firing a gun, you've got to basically use the smallest dice pool and divide it as you see fit between the 2 actions. So if you have, let's say, 6 dice to play with, you could spend 4 dice on driving and 2 dice on firearms. And it makes the game a bit more dangerous, but it also makes a lot more sense from a story and, well, rules perspective, in my opinion. Some of the other rules changes are some of the clan weaknesses have changed slightly. The Tremere weaknesses, for instance, is more penalising to the Tremere. They are definitely more of a cult now, more of a pyramid structure organisation where members of the same clan and other people with dominate can really screw them over than it was before. And similarly, the Gangrel have, or conversely rather, their weakness has become lessened because in the past they would become so bestial as to almost be unplayable, perhaps. But now a lot of the effects are temporary, but not always. There's a lot of looseness in this game that allows the storyteller or the player to craft it as they will, vicissitude it, if you like, into the game that they want it to be. This book, what's more, for all those crunch fans out there, all those people that like their stats, their figures, contains all the weapons you'd expect from a core rulebook, but importantly, it contains every single discipline that has ever been published in a vampire book. Well, I say every single one. It misses out 3 or 4. Blood Paths from Thaumaturgy, which required its own book in Vampire the Masquerade Revised, I think, called Blood Magic, and it also misses out the discipline of Abomwi, but for the most part it does contain every single discipline, and I mean up to 9 points in disciplines where that discipline would allow for a 9-pointer, so 9 points of Dominate or 9 points of Auspex. That's all in here. It also contains every single bloodline, and if you don't believe me, I mean, it contains everything from the Salubri to the Harbingers of the Skulls to the Kia Seed to the Aramanes to the what else? To the Teleavelic Tremere, to the True Bruja, the Samadhi, the Ander, not like I'll tell you something, brother Ander, but Ander is in Mongols, which may be slightly similar. Cappadocians are in it, Lamia are in it, the Noyad are in it. You may not have heard of all of these, and that is good because this book contains everything that you need it to. Now, what are the weak points of this book? Because so far I've just been bigging it up. I have been saying, Vampire the Masquerade 20th Anniversary Edition, you couldn't want anything more from a book like this. Well, I do think that, in a lot of ways. I think Vampire the Masquerade 20th Anniversary Edition will personally hold pride of place on my bookshelf, and I will use it, and it makes an excellent coffee table tome with its lovely silver-lined pages there, and its ribbons, if I haven't mentioned them before. But what are its weak points? It must have some. Well, for one thing, the price tag. The price tag is off-putting, especially to any new role players, any people who aren't established fans of the setting. I can't excuse that. This book is made with incredibly high production values, and so the price tag is in a way warranted, but at the same time, from a marketing point of view, it's cutting off one's nose to spite one's face. All the die-hard fans will buy it, but bringing in people new, that is a weak point. Also, some of the art, only a bare few, is weak, and by weak I mean poor. Because, let's see, some of the clan art. Now, I know some of the clan art was rushed. I know it had to be rushed because I believe the original artist took ill. And bearing in mind this, the clan art is basically the stereotype. So, for instance, the Bruja, which isn't an art piece I mind, an illustration I mind, I think that's fine. I don't mind that for a Bruja, and I especially like the Bloodline art. Pretty much every single piece of Bloodline art is one that I like. But some of the art you can tell it has been rushed. I'll show you the La Sombra. Now, the La Sombra looks good at first, but then you realise where her breast ends on her body. Now, If you can see that in relation to where the rest of her body is, it looks like she's got some massive tumour. Maybe she has. Maybe she was embraced with a massive tumour. But I don't think that was the intention. I think it's just poor art. I know it was rushed. It's not a deal breaker by any means, but I've got to point out highs and lows, and by no means do the lows outweigh the highs. This book is excellent. This book is brilliant. If you have the money, you owe it to yourself as a role player to download it or get it print on demand if you didn't order the limited edition leather-bound version. Thank you very much for watching.